Have you ever wondered if your relationship struggles are normal? Or maybe you have wished you could just ask advice from a relationship expert. Or better yet, how about two experts? Well, I'm happy to tell you, you are in the right place. I am Dr. Morgan Cutlip.
And I am Dr. John Van Epp. Morgan and I are both PhDs in psychology, relationship experts, authors, relationship course creators, and a father-daughter team who will bring our educational background, clinical experience, and research knowledge to real relationship concerns and challenges shared by our guests.
Welcome to the Love Thanks podcast, where we hope to empower you to better engage both your heart and your head in relationships so you can follow your heart without losing your mind. Let's get started. Hello, we are here today with Tricia and Dave. They are a couple who has just a really cool story. Tricia is a singer-songwriter whose last album was about processing her experience becoming a mom, and they wrote a song together on that album where they talked about their experience becoming parents, which is the topic of our podcast today. They've been married 7 years and together 11 years and have a daughter who is 5 and a 3-year-old son. And we're just really glad for you to be here with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we just want to welcome you. And I think a good starting point is, when we're anticipating that first child entering into our lives, there's all these kind of images of what it's going to be like. So can you start by just telling us, what were you expecting before your daughter was born?
Well, I was expecting that, instant bond, all your instincts take over, and maybe you're a little tired, but you bring them out into the world and you show them to everybody, and then they just come with you to all of the things. And that's a very easy process.
And Dave, how about you?
Yeah, I was also expecting, the storybook narrative. But I think I was expecting to lose a lot of sleep, but to have this overwhelming feeling of joy and kind of, the bliss of parenthood. So all the marketing
joyful
worked on
sleeplessness, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I love the pain. Yeah. I live for it now.
It's all, yeah, exactly. And you just always have perspective about the joy, even though you're going through the pain. So I was expecting to have that immediate bond. Everyone talks about when you see your kid for the first time, there's this immediate bond. And so I was expecting that to just continue.
And in your marriage together, there's a lot of expectations of what it's going to be like as we enter into the parenting phase of we're a couple, two individuals in love with each other, but now we're going to be a unit, with an offspring of our own. And so what were kind of the images that you had? Because I think a lot of people relate to these images. There's a lot of people who are like, hey, we've got problems in our marriage. We got to have a kid. Right? That was almost like a age-old wisdom, if you have problems, go have another baby because that's going to fix your problems. But so that obviously must be a lot of idealism that we bring to what children do to our marriage. So what were you guys thinking was going to be happening in your relationship?
Well, I remember when we decided to have kids, Dave had been saying, whenever you're ready, because we knew that we wanted to have children and grow a family. That we knew that from conversations, from dating. And so Dave was like, well, I'm ready when you are, no pressure, but whenever you're ready. And we were out for a walk one night, we were walking the dog, and I was like, I guess I'm ready. And then got pregnant that month. And so I don't think we really knew that we weren't ready, but we had the conversations around it. And we had the conversations around, I would be primary parent at first because I was going to build a career. I just finished my master's. I was going to build a career after and, grow the family. We would grow the family first.
Yeah. I'd say I was feeling pretty grounded and optimistic about our relationship and viewing that as this will be the thing that gets us through a difficult time. Cause the newborn stage is, it is difficult, even though there's a lot of sugarcoating on that. But yeah, so I was really optimistic and pretty at peace with thinking, this is the person I want to do this with, and feeling good about it.
So you guys
So I
went
don't
in
want to.
solid.
Yeah, you went in
We
solid,
were pretty
and I don't
solid,
want
yeah.
to. I don't want to cast a negative shadow on all of that because there are these ideals, but the reality oftentimes is very different. What was reality like for you?
When we became parents?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it started with a really traumatic birth that ended up transferred to the hospital from birthing center, emergency C-section.
It's over a day.
Yeah,
Oh, and so
so
you were
30
going to have
hours
a
of
birthing
labor,
center birth
3 hours
too.
of pushing,
Yeah.
it just, and then a transfer to the hospital. And so that was unexpected. And then she was born and she was okay. And we were so grateful. And then she had colic, which I don't know if, whoever has not experienced colic, it's just, you cannot help your sweet little baby. And they just scream all the time. And there's really not a lot of comfort for them. And a lot of sleeplessness, I had postpartum depression and anxiety, which wasn't, my master's is in applied positive psychology. So that's like my personality. And I just didn't have any tools for postpartum depression, anxiety, wasn't expecting it, was kind of in denial about what it was too. And the communication was hard. It's hard to calmly talk over a screaming baby when you're sleep deprived.
You can't even hear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Couldn't hear each other in the same room because just the crying was nonstop.
Mm-hmm.
And like the only thing that did seem to calm her was bouncing on this big exercise ball for hours on end, holding her. So we each had to like messed up our backs entirely.
Well, and I was recovering from an emergency C-section, major abdominal surgery. So I'm healing from like 2 births basically. So it wasn't good.
Yeah. Yeah. Reality was very different, to answer your question.
I mean, even if you were prepared for that entrance into parenthood, it would have been hard. But to go into parenthood with an expectation of bliss and joy and to feel connected to your baby right away and to have something so drastically different is just so much further to kind of fall in terms of that experience. So I just want to, I don't want to get us off course, but Dave, you said something a couple times about this expectation of feeling that immediate connection. And so I'm sort of inferring that maybe you didn't. And I think this is a piece about parenthood that is starting to get talked about a little bit more, but maybe needs to be highlighted a little bit more, which is that's not always a natural thing that happens in the beginning when you meet your child, especially when they're screaming all the time.
Yeah. I would love to highlight that because for me, you're right. Like I didn't have this immediate connection. I expected it to like be this visceral, almost crippling sensation of connection of like, choirs in the background and light and like just this immediate connection. And, because of all we had been through in the preceding 32 hours or so, like when you finally got to hold the baby, we were just in a state, we hadn't slept in days. I thought, we were going to lose Tricia for a little bit there. And it was a really emotional time. And then to be holding this innocent baby, you can't think about all the joy. You just went through hell, And I felt such shame for months about that because that connection came slowly for me. And it wasn't until we finally kind of got out of the house because, you kind of live in a cocoon for a little bit with the newborn. And, we finally started to visit with some friends. And I remember talking with, a new dad. He was his kid was maybe, I don't know, a year older than ours. And he was very vulnerable with me and shared like, hey, I didn't feel that connection either. And it wasn't until I actually heard from another dad that I like had permission to talk about it, because I just didn't. I felt just shame and embarrassed and mad and, kind of spiraled about how I wasn't feeling the things I thought I should be feeling or that I was promised, So there's a lot of resentment that builds in the background too. And it's hard to know where to put that. And so I think the experience was so different than our expectations that we we each kind of ended up projecting a lot of that on each other, and and then projecting it on ourselves, telling ourselves all this negative talk about like how, the thing was a theme for me was like, I'm a bad dad because I didn't feel that. And really I was doing everything I could, and I felt like looking back on it, we were pretty much superheroes those first couple of months, everything we had to like do and go through.
Mm-hmm.
And we were really hard on ourselves because of the mismatch in expectations. So I think it needs to be talked about because more dads are probably going through that.
As a husband, before you talked to that other dad, did you share any of that with Tricia? Did you let her into kind of your world of struggle with feeling bonded, and even you might even say, happy you have this new child, at times wondering, was this really something that was where our relationship should have gone? And I mean, did that come out in your conversations with her?
I think it did. It felt more of like I was admitting something, when it did come
Like
out.
a confession of something.
Yeah, it was a bit of a confession, and you try to offset it with some humor, being like, "When is this child's parents coming? Who's picking this baby up?" But yeah, it came out in a few different ways, but I don't think I didn't feel, and she was always great at listening to my concerns, but like I didn't feel comfortable staying in that conversation very long because of how much shame I felt about that.
Yeah.
I think he's being a little generous there about me being a great listener, because one of the main struggles I had was holding space for all of these new, difficult, and what felt like dark emotions with postpartum depression, anxiety, and then being able to hold space for his. And I didn't know how to do that. I didn't have any tools. It was easy and intuitive for me before kids. And after kids, I was like, all I have is going to keep this human alive and to keep me from breaking down. I don't have space for this. And I think that's why it was like bits and pieces. So we were aware of each other's, pains, but we weren't able to do much there. I think superheroes is a pretty good word for it, but having compassion for us then. But at the time, yeah, we were really, it's like, I can't be enough for everyone in this situation, let alone each other.
But I think that's actually like quite accurate in terms of what the reality was, is that you didn't have enough to go around, because to maintain composure and not I'm sure it would be like a miracle if you didn't lose it at some point when you have a kid screaming all the time. But to maintain composure while you have a child screaming and you're new to this and we don't know, parents don't know what they're doing in the beginning most of the time. It's a really anxiety provoking time. The shifts in hormones, your body's healing. I mean, all of your energy is going to keeping it together. And so to welcome in any other stuff, I think, is kind of like that tipping point where it feels really hard.
Yeah.
To hold any space.
And then you have, we're not even talking about, you got all work demands and finances, and you got extended family that want to come over and see the baby. And so then you feel like you're doing like, I got to put on a show, got to have the baby look right, be dressed right, look good. You don't want to come in and see the house a mess and everything, like, oh, you've really dropped the ball here, haven't you? So, there's all this performance anxiety on top of it. And so we're not even covering all of that, but that's in there as well.
Yeah.
And it's like, kids, having kids, raising kids is not like, if we do a track meet analogy, it is not like running 100-meter or a 200-meter or a 400-meter. We're like, okay, this is a marathon. We're running 20 miles. You know what I mean? That this,
Sense,
the fatigue factor is something after 2 months, 3 months, you don't really even like each other very well a lot of times in marriage. And this is not talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
A lot of our friends, when we finally when we were opening up and kind of coming back out, we joke about the 4-month fight, because it seems like everyone had this 4-month fight. It was like 4 months in and everyone was at their breaking point. And it's, whenever we would talk about that, and realize, like, when was that for you? Oh, it was about 4 months. When was that for you? Oh, about 4 months. And we're like, okay, so now
It's a thing.
when I have friends who
Yeah.
are having their first, I'm like, just remember there's a 4-month fight. And then when we had Oliver, or when we had our second, I was like, so we can anticipate 4-month fight. Around there, we got to be extra compassionate with each other. A whole lot of grace, because it's coming. And it did.
Yeah. Just because there were other fights, but the 4-month was like the fight.
The tipping point fight. Yeah.
Well, there's a big sleep regression around 4 months usually too. And I think I remember being like, what is this? I had no idea when that hit with our daughter, and it was insane. It's like, I thought we were through the sleep stuff. So that wears you down too. How did you have a second?
How long did the colic last? I'm sorry, Morgan.
The first time you went in blissfully unaware. The second time you're going in knowing what you know, and sometimes that's harder. And so how did you come to the decision, and how did you prepare differently the second time around?
Well, I can actually remember when we decided. We were sitting in like a Potbelly sandwich shop.
With our daughter in her high chair.
Yeah.
And they're close together. They're exactly 2 years apart.
And we were having lunch, and it was a much more practical conversation because we knew a little bit about what would be involved, right? And we're like, look, we always envisioned our family looking like this. It was kind of a long-term vision meet. Are we really, like, if we're going to do it, now's the time. And it's kind of like that kind of conversation where it's, if we want a sibling for our child and we want to, grow our family and have it change in specific ways, there was positive parts of the conversation too. Don't get me wrong, but it was also like a time bound. Like we knew we wanted to have siblings that were close in age because we thought that was important for that relationship. And
and I have a lot of siblings too. And we are close in age, and and I think that we felt like, okay, now we know.
Yeah.
Which it's always going to be different, which,
Can't get any worse than what the first one was. Wasn't there a little bit of, hey man,
we did talk about that.
Might as well got that out of the way.
Yeah, we're like, statistically speaking, we looked it up. We shouldn't have another colicky baby because our daughter was colicky for 5 months.
Impossible.
Like,
so
lightning
funny.
Doesn't strike twice.
Yeah, surprise.
Should have played the lottery.
Sure does. Yeah.
Should have played the lottery.
Yeah, the second colicky baby.
Yeah.
Luckily, that birth was, we kind of knew some more things around that. And that birth was, as births go, the best possible experience I could have hoped for.
Nice.
And so that, I was in labor for 2 weeks, but apart from that, it was like the best possible labor and situation. Easy, but they were both 9.5 pounds, so they were also difficult in births in general, but much better. We kind of had some more boundaries around expectations. I think we had talked a little bit more about, I kind of kicked Dave out of the bedroom for a little bit too, where I was like, we know at least one of us needs sleep.
Yeah, we had different strategies about overnight, like handling baby in the middle of the night.
Yeah, and we saved up. I think the best possible thing we gifted ourselves was a postpartum doula at night. So
that's one big change we made is like from the beginning, we were like, we're saving now because we think we might have another kid. We're going to save for a postpartum doula.
And it was such a gift because 3 nights a week, I got 6-ish hours. Or, it was interrupted for a feed, but I could like literally wake up and feed the baby and just hand him back. And so that was a game changer for us too, because we both got sleep.
Yeah.
In some form.
Gives you something to look forward to.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing. Can you talk about some of the other sort of strategies you apply differently? Like you alluded to some boundaries that you set differently, some things like that. Can you sort of lay out some of the specific things you guys did? I think a doula is an amazing idea.
Oh yeah. And I didn't know that postpartum doulas were a thing until my sister had one, and she was like, oh yeah, she takes the baby at night and I sleep. And I was like, what? So postpartum
that exists?
doula, yeah, that was amazing. What was comical the first time around is we had pre-made a lot of meals in the freezer, and in the first 3 weeks our freezer broke.
It died.
And we lost all of
all the food we had prepped. It was like horrible. A comedy of errors. The first
it's so funny now, but it's horrific.
Oh, it was heartbreaking. Yeah.
That was only
Yeah.
one of like several things, but they were all of that nature where it's like,
Yeah.
just nothing went to plan the first time around.
Yeah.
Oh
And so
my
we kind of
gosh.
knew that this time around we did meal delivery services instead, just to make it easier, like for meal prep and grocery shopping logistically.
Yeah,
What
we
else did expectations around who was visiting and when,
yeah.
just in case postpartum depression, like it's just a very vulnerable place to be. And you can really only have people who you feel safe,
Yeah.
topless and leaking from everywhere in front of. That's for the first 6 weeks at least, but 12 weeks really.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we kind of had some more conversations around that.
How about strategies for your first child being watched while you needed time alone or focus time or energy with the second? So
Yeah.
how did you plan strategies for that?
Luckily, she was in daycare. And so Dave and her had a really sweet kind of morning ritual.
Yeah.
He would drop her off and then bring some food back for me. And on weekends, you guys had some sweet routines where they would go to Starbucks together and like take their time walking around and playing outside. So we kind of had he really bonded, I think, with our daughter at that time.
Yeah. Which was important. Because until that time we hadn't bonded all that strongly. Of course I loved her, but like it, dads aren't moms, for newborns, and, it just like the connection wasn't as strong. And so like with the second baby, I had a lot of time with our daughter during that time. And it was hard for me because, you go into that kind of scared. You're like, man, this is a difficult relationship. She's never really receptive to me, but that you have to have the opportunity. And thankfully kids are very forgiving to keep trying, and that was my opportunity. And so, yeah, a lot of daddy daughter time.
We both, in the meantime, had started therapy, like one-on-one therapy. So not with each other, not couples therapy, but one-on-one, because all these wounds come up when you become a parent. And I don't think we were expecting that either. But so we both kind of had someone to talk to share these things and felt a lot less shame around them and had the words to have the conversations with each other too, which I think was also really helpful, that we had our own therapy. Like we weren't expecting that of each other in that particular time frame. So we could provide emotional support, but not, hey, do you want to try this? Or what about that? That kind of space and problem solving together that we used to do. It was we had someone else licensed help for that.
You guys are just like sharing such rich advice. And I appreciate, Dave, how you're talking about these like moments of disconnection throughout your daughter's life, because I think it's really relatable. And I think that there are a lot of parents, it's usually the dads, right? I mean, where the child or like young toddlerish doesn't want the dad. And I think that it's common to take that personally. I think a lot of parents get kind of offended, like, what do you don't want me, and it's so nice to hear the story of you sort of stepping in and creating more opportunity to have time with her and to connect with her and develop that relationship.
He did that so well, because there were many times I knew he was really scared of feeling rejected again, and he would show up again and again. And
that's parenting. That's what it's a good summary.
It's a lot of rejections from
showing
these.
up.
I want to highlight, Dave, something you said about this specifically. You said, I think you said ritual, or maybe Tricia, you mentioned that he had a sweet ritual. And I want to say, something that you did is a consistent routine of involvement, even just like a regular going out to breakfast or taking her to school, but that consistent routine of involvement is essential for bonding. And and you're right, early on, if moms are breastfeeding, I mean, they can have all kinds of intimate one-on-one time, and the opportunity for dads are a lot of times way more limited in the early kind of like infancy. But as soon as the toddler years start kicking in, right around age 2 to 3, all of a sudden And unfortunately, I think a lot of dads are they're kind of out of the routine. They haven't established any routines, and if they're not careful, they miss out on the opportunity that opens up right then to step in. But it was wonderful that you did, and your experience is totally the payoff, because it's the experience of the bond. And can you talk for a second? How did you bonding with the daughter actually help Tricia?
Well, you might be better to answer that, but I think it emotionally was probably a relief to Tricia, because I think, she cares very deeply about my happiness too. And I think it was always a weight, knowing that I was struggling to connect, consistently with our daughter and, with my son too, when he was just born. It was a little slightly different there, but I think she wanted so badly for that to be better and to fix that and to try and help that when she saw it happening, I think it was a big relief for you. I don't know. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
a lot of gratitude around that too. And maybe a bit selfishly or practically speaking, I felt like there was some emotional weight lifted in terms of my responsibility.
For sure.
And you may guess from the conversation, I have a people-pleasing tendency. So even with our kids, and I would want to help them feel better, or, feel that emotional responsibility for everyone, Dave included. And then I could see he could do that for her too now.
Yeah.
And that was like, it felt very, well, I was really grateful that he kept showing up and trying again and again, because I knew that was tough. And then also felt really grateful that I could see their bond, and it was a really beautiful thing to grow. And then logistically speaking, I had a little less on my plate.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to affirm that that's not selfish. That's
not, no.
It's very,
like, no,
it's not. No, it's just very fulfilling, because one of the things that as a parent you want is your partner to be bonded and close and a good parent to your own children. So part of what you want altruistically, lovingly for your own child is that they have a strong relationship with the parent, their other parent, right? It's part of that kind of like undefined, almost unconscious feeling that is floating around, and if it's not happening, which is kind of natural for a while, then it just feels like this unfulfilled sense of what there's something missing here. And then when you see it, it just is all like puzzle pieces coming together.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to be okay. It's been a couple years.
Yeah.
We've been in the thick of it. We're going to be okay.
Yeah.
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 And if you were unit.
Oh, yeah. And if you were feeling some of the burden of responsibility for their relationship, I would imagine you felt lighter when you saw all of it start clicking and coming together.
Yeah, definitely.
So I really want to know from the two of you, in terms of your relationship, we're talking a lot about your relationship with your children, but in terms of your relationship, what happened through this experience that you look back and you're like, we really grew in these important ways because of what we went through in our introduction to becoming parents?
I think a lot. I'll start. We broke in a lot of ways. I think it's important to acknowledge that. And in repairing, I think just like a body does, you repair stronger because you learn from that. We had to learn how to like argue better, how to fight better, and not to win, but to like communicate. Yeah. And that was a skill that, it takes practice to do that. And luckily we had a lot of opportunities to do that. And, we employ those skills on a daily basis now, I think. And, we kind of just learned where our own limits were. And I think that's super important because we can recognize that in ourselves and help the other person help you in a way. Mm-hmm. But also kind of see that those patterns in your partner, is really important because you can quickly kind of identify trigger moments and then react to that. And in a better way than just this emotional reaction.
Mm-hmm. And we did couples therapy to get some of those tools.
Yeah, we had to
well.
really work at that.
Yeah. And then I think kind of the marathon analogy is good here too, that in our marriage, that it felt more that there would be phases, that there would be phases where we can be, you know, we met and we were going on lots of dates and it was very passionate. And then we had this grounded sense of love and that was wonderful. And then this really difficult stage of the introduction to parenthood, it's not as beautiful. It's really messy, but a lot of growth happens from there. And then kind of knowing like, hey, I'm looking forward to going on date. I mean, COVID kind of put a little trouble around going on dates again, going and getting babysitters and time away, just us. But, you know, that there will be phases and that it's long-term game here. And so there's a little more, I would say, like grace and forgiveness around those difficult moments. Like I make less of a story around, will this work? Won't this work? It's a bit more like, this is a bumpy part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love that. John has a saying, the myth of the eternal present, which is what you're talking about, which I think is so key for couples to remember, which is that just because it's this way right now doesn't mean it's going to be this way forever. It's not going to feel like this forever. And it sounds like that was a big lesson you took away, which is this is a season, it will pass, and another one is kind of around the corner, and we can navigate this and become more equipped to handle it better and in different ways.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine if you had quit, divorced, broke up. I mean, this happens to couples in the moment of exhaustion. They're in a moment. And just like Morgan said, it feels like it's a never ending moment. This is how it's always going to be. We've lost our relationship. But how wonderful you talk about second wind. I think of it like we got to get our second wind again. I mean, you do that over and over and over, but it is through the persevering that you begin to realize, oh, our journey has now a whole different landscape, but this is a very different landscape, but it's a beautiful, like, wow, I can't believe this. What we're seeing now in this landscape, I thought it was like going to be just a horrible storm, but it's just broke to have, beauty and rainbows and growth. And, that's all that storm brought about was new growth. And we see this and that. And I mean, it's this persevering and perspective is something that many of us have to really embrace and take to heart, that it is only with the persevering that the new perspective arises.
Mm-hmm. What advice do you have for couples who are just kind of entering into parenthood or who are expecting and it's right around the corner for them?
I would say for couples who are expecting, I don't know that there was anything anybody could have said to me that people would try and I would just kind of be like, let me do me. And so for couples who are expecting, I think I would say, be brave and listen to yourself and welcome to the ride. And couples who are going through it right now, that newborn just becoming parents, that they're not alone and it's tough and that's okay, but it's tough.
Yeah. I think that I'm just thinking back through when I've talked to, friends who are expecting what I've told them. And it tends to be that kind of, there's two sides to the advice now. It's like, it's going to be great, but it's okay if it's not, to summarize it. And I think people need to hear that because everyone's experience is going to drastically differ. And you never want to like rain on the parade, but I think it's okay to say, there's a lot of really amazing moments and you should really spend a lot of time there emotionally and thinking about that and like feeling into that. But there are also really hard moments that nobody talks about. And then those are okay. It doesn't mean the whole thing is bad.
And I just want to reiterate something that, Dave, you loved Tricia and kept giving to her and trying to be understanding of her. And, postpartum depression almost changes your personality. It's like a personality transformation for a period of time. And to believe that the real Tricia is there still. somewhere. And Tricia, even though you were exhausted, he would come to you and he would talk, whether he was joking, like, when are the parents coming? Like, right? He said things like that. But I heard you say, I didn't have much space to give to him. I was just trying to manage myself. But in the midst of that, I did hear that you were giving to him. It maybe wasn't all that you wanted, but I think Dave would say, yeah, she was there. She was part of me. And that is something that I just think that parents, before that baby enters this world, they got to look at each other, take each other's hand and say, I don't know what exactly is going to happen to you after this baby is born, or what we're going to go through, or what this baby is going to be like. But we're going to not quit on each other. We're going to hang in there. We're going to walk together. We're going to learn from each other. We're going to listen to each other. I think there needs to be that kind of, you guys are songwriters, that chorus to the song of their relationship.
The chorus too, that song that we wrote 4 years after, is "Love Me Anyway." And it's kind of saying, like, I'm not in the, like, I'm going to be mean to you and love me anyway, not in that kind of sense, but like, we're going to have grace for each other and love me anyway. And I think that the arc it takes is really kind of takes you through the grit and out on the other side. And we had also written a song for our wedding called Our Wedding Day. And that the chorus to that is choosing you every step of the way. Like, it's that choice that you're going to show up for each other. And that one's definitely more, a little more optimistic. It's for a wedding day, but we hadn't had kids yet.
Those themes really come through as you talk about your experience. And I think when the comment John's referring to, when you said, you held the space for me, and you're like, I think that's being a bit generous, but I think that you both are mutually generous to one another in lots of ways. And I think that was such an important piece of your story, and how you showed up for each other and supported each other along the way and offered so much grace. So you guys,
it was a skill we had to build, because I think we didn't have a whole lot at the beginning. So just in case someone's like, well, I'm not a very gracious person, we've had to build that skill. You can learn. Yeah.
Thank you so much, you guys. We are going to link your song, and we'll link your Instagram so everyone can find you and learn more about you. But you just shared so much wisdom and relatable moments and stories, and just appreciate your vulnerability and spending this time with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us, and for all that you're doing to help everyone sort out relationships, because it's a long game.
It really is.
So thank you.
Thank you for tuning in. You can learn more about the Love Things content by hanging out with Dr. Morgan on Instagram at MyLoveThings, or visit our blog at mylovethings.com.
And we're happy to offer an affordable subscription to the Love Things membership, where you will gain access to a library of videos and resources on a wide range of relationship topics. Also included are monthly live Q&As, where we answer relationship questions and discuss relevant relationship issues.
All this and more can be found on mylovethings.com. And remember, the best relationships are those where you follow your heart without losing your mind.